Uh, I'm Dr. David, and we'll just start at the beginning, just take it one step at a time. So the title of this talk is 7 Keys to Embodied Spirituality. So let's just spend a minute or two on the title. So a key implies a lock, and we have locks, our consciousness, our DNA. We have some locks, and some of the locks we kind of have a sense of having, and some of them we don't even know we have. But there are keys that unlock those locks to the realization of our fuller potential. So that's what I mean by keys. And then by embodied spirituality, I mean that you're living it, not that you're thinking about it, not so much that you're desiring it, not so much that you're seeking it, not so much that you're curious about it, but I'm talking about actually living it, where what I mean by spirituality is I mean your relationship, your conscious relationship with whatever you want to call it, God, creator, source, whatever, that is alive for you as a person, that you're living that, you're embodying it and you're expressing it. And so as you're living your life, you're actually a living bridge between these higher dimensions and the earth plane. That's what today's all about. So we probably won't have time for questions here, but after the talk, I'll go back to my booth for an hour and we can talk about anything you guys want to talk about. I want to introduce Lauren. Lauren is going to be my assistant today because some of the things I talk about, I think it'll come to life for you through a combination of what I'm talking about and some diagrams that she's going to put up there and write some words down. So there are going to be some times when I'm going to ask her to come up and do that. And my son Jonathan's going to give me a 10-minute warning notice so that I get done on time. I want to talk a little bit about why and how this talk came to be. So, as you heard in my introduction, this isn't my first rodeo. I've been around for a while. And there was a period for many decades where I was very active publicly, hundreds of lectures, presentations, workshops, seminars. And what was really moving me at the time was that I had a strong sense of that it was a critical time to get as many people as possible to understand what was going on so that they could consciously choose their path more toward the light or the dark rather than just be unconscious sheeple. And so I did that for many decades. And then I got a sense that at a soul level, people had pretty much already made their choices. And I kind of retreated from that public life and I focused mostly on the students that I had. And about 2 months ago, I had a strong feeling that the energies on the planet had changed to the point where these people that had already chosen the light, that I could help them along, that I could help to make their journey smoother, more powerful, that I had something to offer. And so that was the why behind why I'm doing this talk. And I want to talk a little bit about the how, because this has been one of the most challenging presentations I've ever had to prepare for, because number one, I didn't know the consciousness of the audience in particular. And number two, when I was brainstorming the keys, I originally came up with about 60 keys. And so I had to keep going back, culling it. And so I finally got it down to 7 plus a few more. And the criteria that I ended up using were 2 criteria to get to that point. One, it had to be something that would be really valuable for you. that are already on the path. And the other criteria was that it had to be something that if I didn't share it with you, you wouldn't necessarily have been likely to hear it from another teacher. So those were my two criteria for the final selection of what I decided to present today. So obviously there's some things that are critical to embodied being, successful embodied being, that I won't have time to get into. Like there's a whole area of things that support direct physical practices and vitality and things like that. There are whole fields of nutrition, herbology, movement, lots of things like that. I'm not going to be getting into that today because, like I said, I think a lot of that information is out there, fairly accessible to any sincere seeker. So I'm not saying that everything I'm talking about is a complete answer to the question or the opportunity, but I'm leaving that out. Certainly to express your spirituality fully in this world, obviously a certain level of financial wealth and health is very helpful, but I'm not going to be getting into that. That's an area I could get into. I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to focus mostly on two areas. One is a more conscious, joyful, powerful use of the mind. Because the mind can be a wonderful servant, but the mind can be a terrible master. And so your relationship to the mind and how to have the mind work for you in service to love or whatever it is you're in service to is a big deal. Because for most people, their minds are using them instead of you using your mind. So a lot of what I talk about is going to have a direct impact on an increased mastery for you in relation to your mind. And then some of the things that I'm going to point to are designed to help you go to know yourself beyond the mind. And they kind of go together because you are senior to your mind. And you can't really master your relationship to the mind unless you have a strong sense of who you are as senior to the mind. So these two kind of go together. They go together really nicely. I want to talk about how to get the most out of this presentation, because it's a little bit different than most presentations. Most presentations are either about giving you data, giving you information, and you're like taking it in, wondering if you believe it or don't believe it. And it won't be very valuable if you're being with me in that way. What would be much more valuable for you is to don't worry about whether you believe me or don't believe me. Just be with what I'm saying and notice what comes up for you if you're just being with what I'm saying. You'll get a lot more benefit out of this that way. Also, there's a lot of really powerful material, a lot of powerful ideas, and each of you are at different levels on your journey, and don't worry about what you're not getting. You can get so focused on what you're not getting that you're going to miss a lot of the other stuff, and just focus on what it is that resonates with you, what you are getting. And then if you have questions, like I said, in the next hour, I'll be over there. This is very powerful material. If you just get one or two whoppers from today, that can really be life-changing. So there's no quiz at the end. Don't worry about trying to remember any of this. Just let what hits you hit you. One of the things that's really nice is that this is being recorded and it'll be up on YouTube. So you could go over this again and again and again, and every time it's like it's alive. It's like something new. You'll get a lot more out of it that way. Thanks for either turning your cell phones off or putting them on a low vibrate mode. I think that'll help. Okay, so let's just take a couple of minutes to consciously connect mind and heart. Okay, so I'm going to borrow a very quick but powerful technique that comes from heart math, and I'm going to describe it, and then we can do it for a couple of minutes. So what I'm going to ask you to do in a minute, I'll ask you to put your things down, uncross your arms and legs, put your feet flat on the ground, and I'm going to ask you to put your hands like this, not right now, but I'm going to ask you to do this, okay? And then what I'm going to do is have you pick one of these 4 words that represent different positive energies that resonate with the heart. Either gratitude or appreciation or care or compassion. Whichever one of those 4 words opens your heart the most. I'll say them again. Gratitude, appreciation, care, and compassion. So take the word that you feel like when you focus on one of those things that opens your heart. Okay, and then what I'm going to have you do is close your eyes, and I'm going to have you imagine a person or scene that invokes that particular emotion or energy. And then I'm going to have you take 3 deep breaths, imagining that the breath is going into the heart and out of the heart. The exhale needs to be a little bit longer than the inhale. So we're going to do that now. So when you're ready, I want you to put your hands the way that I told you. And then I want you to pick either gratitude, appreciation, care, or compassion. Then close your eyes. And now imagine a person or scene that evokes either that gratitude or that appreciation or that care or compassion. Stay connected with that energy now. Take 3 enjoyable, pleasant, medium deep breaths, imagining the breath is going into the heart, mixing with your soul, and then out of your heart. Feel the feeling that you chose. You can let go of the image once you're really in touch with the energy of that particular word. Then just allow that to complete. And just take a moment to notice the shift in your own being, your sense of yourself, your sense of the energy in the room. Maybe even the size of the room might seem more intimate to you as the energy becomes more coherent in the room. And there's less static on the line. And then just allow your hands to drop down as you complete the exercise. That just took like a minute. Just took like a minute, maybe 2 at the most. And you have that. Now you have that for the rest of your life to connect the brain and the heart. And that's very important because it sets the stage for the primacy of the heart and allowing the brain and the mind to be in service to love. Okay, let's re-engage our minds now. Okay, so I'm going to talk about something that is very, very powerful. And I'm going to take my time on it because this is really a biggie. I call this the principle of positivity, and it doesn't have anything to do with positive thinking. It's a principle. And I'm going to describe the principle, and then I'm going to give a bunch of examples, and then I'm going to talk about why it's so powerful and how to work with it. Okay? So, positivity is the principle that states that senior to or behind any negative goal, and I will define what I mean by that, is at least one positive goal. And I'll define that, and I'll give a bunch of examples. I'm going to say it again, and then I'll go into detail. So the principle of positivity states that senior to or behind any negative goal has to be at least one, if not more, positive goals. So now I'll give you examples and I'll bring that principle to life for you. So a negative goal is anything you want to move away from, anything you want to avoid, anything you want to minimize, anything you want to get rid of, anything you want to push against. So for example, I'll give you examples of negative goals, and you can see how much of the time people are stuck in negative goals. I don't want to be fat. I don't want to be broke. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be shy. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be old. I don't want to be too young. I don't want to be fat. Those are all negative goals. Those are all things that are motivating people, and they really are under the spell that that's what they really want. They really are being that they don't want to be fat. They don't want to be poor. They don't want to be broke. They really believe that that's what they want. But that's never, ever, ever the full expression of what it is that they want. And the principle of positivity states that that can never, ever be a full expression of what they really want. And it goes on to state that the only reason you would want to move that away or push that away is because at some level you believe that that is keeping you from something you really do want to be or do or have or experience. So you can prove that to yourself. If you don't want to be fat, you don't want to be fat because you believe it keeps you from something else that you really want. Maybe you want to be thinner. Maybe you want to look a particular way. Maybe you want to feel a particular way. You don't want to be broke. Why not? Because you believe being broke keeps you from whatever financial freedom represents for you. You don't want to be shy because you believe that being shy keeps you from being relaxed, from being confident, from being right there, crisp, right in present time. But here's the thing. You can get so caught up in being that what you really want is to avoid what you don't want that you don't end up anywhere near what you want. It would be like if this was not wanting to be shy. And I want to avoid not being shy. And so I might end up going over here to avoid being shy. But maybe this is not at all close to what I really want, which is that feeling of being at ease, confident, relaxed. Maybe that's all the way over here. So this is a very, very powerful insight, life-changing insight. And so how do you use it? How do you work with it? How do you work with it? Well, the way you work with it is that you become aware of what it is that you're not wanting when you're in that negative goal space. You identify that, like we just did. I don't want to be fat. I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be broke. And then you ask yourself the magic question, which I gave you earlier, and I'll give it to you again. What is it that I really want to be, do, have, or experience that I believe blah, 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 in this case, being shy, keeps me from being, doing, having, or experiencing? Then once you get an answer that resonates with you, now you go, oh, yeah, that's what I want. Now you can use the mind to your advantage by focusing on what you really want instead of trying to get rid of what you don't want. And it's even worse than that. Do you know why? I'll tell you why it's even worse than that. It's worse than that because of the way the subconscious mind works. The subconscious mind doesn't work with logic like you and I are thinking now. It works in terms of feelings and images. So when you say, I don't want to be fat, now you have a strong emotion combined with an image in the subconscious of being fat. Now your mind, your subconscious mind now is working totally against you. Not on purpose, but it's working completely opposite of what it is that you consciously think you want. The stronger the emotion, the clearer the image of what you don't want. Now that's what your subconscious mind that's working 24/7, that's what it's focusing on. The subconscious mind doesn't understand a logical operative like the word not. It doesn't work like that. It works with images and emotion. That's why a lot of times bad things happen to good people and finally they give up and things get better. They surrender. They stop thinking about it. And it gets better. That's why. Okay, so this is very powerful. So I'll give you the magic question again. Is what is it that I really want to be, do, have, or experience that I believe blah, blah, blah keeps me from? And another advantage of mastering this, how to work with the principle of positivity, is you don't, this is a biggie, you don't have to be afraid to discover something you don't want. Because now you know how to turn it to your advantage. A lot of people on the spiritual path, they dabble, they're afraid to go deep. Because when you go deep in the spiritual path, guess what? You become more aware. And guess what? You become more aware of what you like, and you become more aware of what you don't like. And if you don't have a way to be with what you don't like, pretty soon you'll get so depressed, you'll go back to whatever your thing is. Ice cream, movies, shopping. All of a sudden, this video game will become very exciting to you. But you don't know why. You lose your edge on your spiritual path, and you don't know why. But sometimes the reason why is because you're experiencing more pain than Joe Sixpack, who's never thought about spirituality ever. And you're in more pain and you don't understand why. That's part of why. Because you don't know how to be with what you don't like, what you don't want, in a way that actually serves you. And once you trust yourself to be able to see what you don't like, what you don't want, and not be afraid of it because you know how to work with it to your advantage, that is so powerful. Now, take that principle and apply it to the world today. Think about it. Think about the world today, how polarized it is. Now you can use that to your advantage. You see? It's very powerful. Very, very powerful. So I want to tie this into the function of dreaming and imagination and passion. So I'm going to ask Lauren to come up now. And I'm going to ask her to draw a triangle. And at the top of the triangle, in the angle, I want her to put the word dreamer. And on the lower left, I want her to put realist. And on the bottom right, I want her to put the word critic. These are functions of being. And I'm going to describe them. And I'm going to talk about how most people work with them and how it messes them up. And I'm going to talk to you about a way to work with them that actually works. And then we'll get into a discussion about the importance of passion. Because a lot of people are afraid of their passion, which is very interesting. Okay. So this is a description of 3 different functions that are going on with you, whether you know it or not. There's a part of you that is imagining things. that don't exist physically. Maybe it's a memory, maybe it's something that you project into the future. But you have the capacity to imagine in a way that my dog doesn't. Like, for example, I don't think my dog could be here right now and imagine what I would look like in a green shirt. It's just not part of the being of a dog. But it's part of the being of a human being that you have the blessing and the curse of being able to imagine things that don't exist right now in the physical world. And depending on how you work with that, that can be a blessing to you, or you can be fantasizing about the most horrible things possible and drive yourself to the point where you won't leave your house, right? It's a very powerful function that human beings have that animals don't have, plants don't have, rocks don't have. So it's part of the human experiment, okay? Now the realist is the part of you that actually does things in the physical world. There are certain things you know how to do. You know how to walk, you know how to talk, you know how to drive cars. There are certain things you know how to do. And that's part of what human beings do. They do things and they develop skills, and the realist can do things. And that's part of what a human being does. You do things. You take action. Okay? And then another thing that human beings do is they can critique things. You can critique your actions, but you can also critique your imaginations, right? And again, that can be a blessing or it can be a curse, depending on how you use the critical function. So one of the problems is most people, these different functions kind of talk over each other. It's like you start dreaming and the critic goes, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, well, I'd love to go to Hawaii, but I don't have a money. Oh, I'd love to do this, but I'm too old. Oh, I'd love to do that, but you failed it 20 times before. Right? So the critic can be like that and just suffocate your dreams and suffocate your actions. But what if the dreamer and the realist and the critic, what if you could take charge of those functions? What if you could get them to trust each other and work together? What if they became like different cabinet members and you were the president? Right? What if you were willing to take responsibility for the final choice of your actions? What if you were willing to take final responsibility for the final choice of what comes out of your mouth? Then you wouldn't have to be afraid of the dreamer, because you wouldn't be afraid of, oh, I'm going to do everything the dreamer thinks of. I'm afraid to dream because I might just, do something totally nuts that I'll regret. So I'm just not going to dream, because dreaming gets me in trouble. Dreaming gets me in trouble. Dreaming, not so good. There's a problem with that. You stop dreaming, you start dying. Where there's no vision, the people perish, right? So there's two tricks to having this work. One is that the dreamer and the realist and the critic need to get on the same page. They need to all be in service to you. They all need to be in service to love. They need to be respected. The dreamer needs to be able to dream. The realist needs to have the freedom to do things. The critic has to have the freedom at the right time to critique what you're doing, to critique your dreams, to not talk over each other. I meet so many people that by the time they're 25, they have lost touch with their passion. They're not dreaming. Their consciousness now is being unwittingly giving their power away to their present circumstances. But your present circumstances are only reflecting either the collective consciousness or where your consciousness was in the past. It's a catch-22. So the first thing is they need to trust each other and work together. But the second thing is they need to trust you. The dreamer needs to be able to dream so it trusts you that you're just not going to do everything it dreams about. The critic has to be able to express itself, knowing that you're just not going to agree with it all the time. You're not going to disagree with it all the time. You're the one that's going to make the final call. And you're the one that's going to decide what to actually do. So if you're willing to take responsibility for being the final arbiter of how you actually show up, then you can have all three of these functions working together in your favor, which is a powerful way to use emotion and to use the mind in service to love, in service to the heart, in service to what it's really all about, in service to who you really are. Okay? Powerful stuff. Just let it in, see if it resonates, see if it interests you, work with it on your own. You can always talk to me more. Let's take a deep breath. It's important to track your own energy. I'm not always here to say, let's take a deep breath. You've got to get to the point where you go, oh, I'm going to take a deep breath. You ready for more? Yeah. I want to talk about questions. We think in questions, don't we? We think in questions, don't we?
Yes.
You get it? Don't we? Is a question.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We think in questions. Now, there's one way that we've all been trained to use questions. Like when we want to get an accurate answer. So I can go to my smartphone and I can Google, I can say, what's the quickest way to get to the nearest Pete's Coffee from my house? And it'll give me an accurate answer. Or if you're in school, you take a test and you get brownie points for having the right answer. Right? You're at work, you get brownie points for having the right answer. So we've been conditioned that that's why we ask questions, to get the right answer. And that works really well for some things in human life, right? It's that kind of questioning that gets us to build cars, to build computers, to build airplanes and all that stuff. And that's great. But there's another way to use questions that is very helpful when you want to access what you don't know that you don't know yet. That first way of using questions is pretty impotent when it comes to accessing what you don't know yet. It's good for when there's something you don't know. But if you want to open up access to what you don't know, asking a question trying to find the right answer is pretty impotent. It doesn't really open that up for you. But there's another way to be with questions. There's another way to work with questions that's really useful when you want to access what you don't know. And I hope you know that about 99.9% of the universe is stuff you don't know about yet. And the more you know, and the more you don't know, the more you know how much there is that you don't know yet. And it keeps expanding. So we all know about this one way of working with questions is to ask a question to get an accurate answer, one accurate answer. But there's this other way to be with questions where the question itself becomes a space to be inside of, to look out from, it whatever there is to look out from that space that you couldn't see before because you didn't have that view. So for example, if you ask a question like, what could I be doing today that would be joyous? There's not a right answer. There's not one right answer to that question. And if you go for the one right answer, you won't allow the unfoldment of the answer. You need to be able to be with the question, inside the question. Like the question is like a new frame. And you're putting yourself in the frame, looking out from that frame and seeing whatever you see that you couldn't see because you weren't looking from that frame before you asked the question. The question is the new frame. It's the new point from which to look that you didn't access before you asked the question. It's like when you are driving on a mountain road and you get to an outlook to view something beautiful. You see things you couldn't see if you weren't looking out from that frame, you see? And there are certain questions where you can't get at what's valuable by looking for the right answer. Like if you ask a question like, where am I? Not where is your body in space. But if you ask a question like, where am I? You can't answer it with the right answer. See? Who am I? What am I? You're not going to get at anything useful by trying to find the right answer. It'll be in the being with the question. Being able to be with the question rather than trying to find an answer. You just be with the question and you be with it and you see what you see and you feel what you feel, and then maybe that leads to another question. Maybe that leads to something you couldn't see before, and then that leads you somewhere else. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, that because we got so much acknowledgement for using questions the other way and getting the right answer, you could get stuck in thinking that that's the only way to use questions. And there are certain questions that you can't get any traction with, you can't get any power with, if you're being with the question like you're trying to find the one right answer. Especially if you are attempting to have some kind of creative breakthrough in an area. You don't want to suffocate your being with a question by trying to find the answer. There's a lot of times there's many possible workable solutions to something. But if you're a dog and you go for the bone, maybe if you just hung out with it a little while, there'd be a 7-course meal right behind you. But you'd never know it, right? See? So this is another valuable way to work with the mind, so that the mind actually is in service to you, is to realize that there's those two different ways of being with questions. I want to talk really quickly about, I'm going to skip over one thing because of time. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the relationship between unity and uniqueness. Okay, so You know, you hear spiritual teachers talk all the time about there's only one, unity. There's only one, unity. And when the ego hears that, the ego says, well, that's ridiculous. Come on. I'm here. She's over there. She's over there. That's blue. That's green. Well, these are obviously separate, so this unity thing's got to be a bunch of crap. That's what the ego says. Now, the reason the ego says that is because the ego doesn't have the capacity to make the distinction between separateness and uniqueness. But you do. Okay? So, the idea of unity isn't to avoid being a unique soul, to be a unique human being. It's not to go into oblivion. You see, into the ego, this is very confusing. Very confusing, like, doesn't make sense. But if you understand that it's not about unity versus separateness, it's unity being one side of the coin and uniqueness being the other side of the coin. Your soul is a unique fractal of the one. You see? Now, let me give you a visual that will really bring that home. So let's say the ego's looking at a rainbow, and the ego's saying, oh, all this spiritual stuff is a bunch of crap. Obviously, any idiot can see that there's 7 separate colors to that rainbow. What is this bullshit about unity? That's how the ego looks at the rainbow. But let me tell you how the Holy Spirit looks at the rainbow. The Holy Spirit says to the ego, I can see how you would think that, but you don't have the big picture. You see, what's really going on here is there's white light. There's one light. And under certain conditions, it's refracting in such a way that we have the expression of these 7 unique colors. And the ego goes, that's blowing my fucking mind. I can't even think like that. But you can. See? You can. You can. And you see, when you understand unity and uniqueness, you understand what Jesus said when he said, to be in the world but not of the world. See, same idea. Same idea. You see, and this is why wokeism is so dangerous. This is why groupthink is so dangerous. Because you're meant to be a unique expression. Your soul, yours, meant to be a unique expression of the one. You see? That's why the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights is such a monumental human experiment, right? It's saying that individuality is important. The right you have to, as an individual, to find out who you are and what floats your boat. That's a respect for uniqueness that doesn't exist in many other political structures. That's why there's such a big attack on the United States. If you were the dark, where would you go? Right? So this will help you. Understanding that unity and uniqueness are 2 sides of one coin will help you to get out of this ego trap of, well, you know, things are obviously separate, so there can't be unity. It'll help you get past that. It'll help you get to a more complete understanding of the way the universe actually works. And that's when you'll be at the greatest peace. The more wisdom you have to go along with the love, the more the love will have the positive effect you truly desire. A lot of times the road to hell can be paved with very good intentions because you lack the wisdom to go along with the love. I want to talk about another thing that's kind of paradoxical from an ego point of view, and that is this idea. 5 minutes? Yeah. I'm at 15 now. Okay. Let me just do this real quick and I'll wrap it up. Total commitment and total non-attachment. This is a very important principle. This was the heart of the Buddhist teaching, but it has been misunderstood to think that passion is bad, that desire is bad, that dreaming is bad. That's not what he meant. He meant that if your standards for accomplishing your desire is a fixed idea, that's going to lead to suffering. If you want to become more handsome, but your strategy is that you have to look like Brad Pitt, you're going to suffer because you've tied in a desire to a fixed idea. You see, and that may not be the way it's meant to come for you, you see. So this total commitment, total non-attachment is something that I can speak from very direct experience, from having worked with thousands of patients for many decades. I think what has allowed me to stay in the game this long has been that I practice this. In other words, when I'm with a patient or I'm with a student or right here and right now, you can probably feel it. I'm completely committed to giving you my very best, to giving you all that I've got. But at the same time, I'm not attached to whether you get it or not. That's up to you. You see, if I was attached to whether you got it, then I would be in fear all hour that you're not getting it. And if I was in fear, then I couldn't be teaching what I'm teaching. I'd be teaching fear. Okay? So, total commitment, total non-attachment is a really powerful thing to really have it be a goal to really embody that. It leads to much greater satisfaction, much greater peace, much greater passion, a greater effectiveness. There's no downside to it once you really understand it. I have so many other goodies I want to talk to you about. You want me to keep going till we get kicked out? Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. You know, everybody knows about some of the major addictions, and we're getting better about being with that. But I want to talk about two addictions that, when I really go deep with people, these come up. And they're not talked about a lot. And remember, one of my criteria was to give you tidbits that you might not get from other teachers. So, one addiction that a lot of times is not recognized because of the bias of our culture is addiction to winning. It's a biggie. If you're addicted to winning, you're afraid of losing. You want to go through your whole life afraid of losing? I'd rather have total commitment, total non-attachment myself. But if that's not on the menu, you could default to an addiction to winning. Addiction to winning can cause a lot of suffering. A lot. And it's hidden in our culture. That's why total commitment, total non-attachment can get you out of that trap. Now, another one that is really goes along with this, that is, you'll confront it at some point in your spiritual journey, because it has to do with the way that the ego is organized at a structural level. So you're going to have to confront this at some point, is addiction to pressure. Addiction to pressure. Because when you're addicted to pressure, you get an adrenaline rush. And you think that's life. You think that's passion. You think that's excitement. But it's really anxiety. It's really fear. And this is going to be probably a stretch for many of you, but I'm going to put it out there. Not that I expect you to grok it necessarily, but just planting a seed. And that is that if there was no pressure, there would be no ego activity. If there was no ego activity, there would be no pressure. There would only be what is. There would only be the flow of life. The ego only knows things. It can never know anything directly because its whole way of knowing is based on pressure gradients. It's based on this pushing against this and then measuring that, comparing it, contrasting it. That's why it could never know you. You see? Because if you're an infinite being, where's the pressure? If life is a flow, if real life is a flow, then where's the pressure? If real love is a flow, then where's the pressure? See? So addiction to pressure locks you into ego-based consciousness without you even knowing it. And if you're being that the only way you can perform and be motivated and be inspired is to be under pressure, guess what you're going to default to? Pressure. And you're going to get a lot of reward. Society is going to reward you for being great under pressure. You see? So it's very seductive. Very seductive. The ego's view of success is very seductive. Very seductive. I have to talk about one more thing because it's so vital to spirituality, and that is judgment. Have you noticed that even when you or other people have been told over and over by the greatest spiritual teachers that judgment is suffering, have you noticed how difficult it can be to let judgment go? Even though intellectually you understand to some extent that it's a tremendous cause of suffering? Well, if that's the only way you have to guide your life, you're going to default to it. Otherwise, you're afraid you're going to become some jellyfish blob. It would be like going into a gas station and thinking that there was only the lowest octane fuel to put into your tank. Well, that's fine maybe if you have a VW, but what if you want to be a Ferrari? It's not going to work, okay? So judgment works up to a certain point, but eventually it causes suffering. So a judgment is a statement about the worth of the thing itself. So I'll give you an example and I'll contrast it to something else, which I would recommend instead. Fine? 5 o'clock. Okay, we got to go. I'll be over there. I pushed it as far as I could.